The marathon may be the ultimate test of individual performance, but the success of the Boston Marathon comes down to community.
The Boston Marathon is something that a great many people have a very proprietary sense of. It's their race.
Coming up on Beyond the Medals, we'll explore the bonds that have linked a unique event with a great city for more than a century, strengthened by a business partnership that's lasted decades.
The unique relationship that we have with the BAA is not a sponsorship. It is truly a partnership.
We'll hear from the race's reigning winner, whose emotional victory 1 year ago truly meant so much to so many.
With the Boston Strong, I tried to give them Mev Strong.
And we'll talk with the mayor of Boston, who's ready to lead his city on a long run to host the 2024 Olympic Games.
It's a real opportunity to promote the city of Boston on a world stage like we've never been promoted before.
Plus, Olympic champion Frank Shorter joins us in studio.
It always pays to be first, whether it's in the race or as a marathon. Boston is the first.
The business of the marathon straight ahead on Beyond the Medals. Hello, I'm Rick Horrow, and welcome to Beyond the Medals, the show that adds value to your understanding of sport with the focus on the business behind the games. Let's get started by playing a little brand association. I say Boston, you'll probably say marathon. For 119 years, the Boston Marathon's been a local treasure and a global icon, the holy grail for runners around the world. In the last 2 years, though, it's become a symbol of human effort and resiliency in the face of tragedy. And in a sport that highlights individual endurance and performance, the secret to its success is how it's raced.
Really what makes it special here is summed up, I think, in one word, which is engagement. The engagement of the entire community around Boston, Massachusetts, New England, the running world, and at times the entire world. The Boston Marathon is something that a great many people have a very proprietary sense of. It's their race.
Tom Grilk has been deeply engaged with the Boston Marathon for some 40 years, going back to his days as a competitor. Now he's the driving force behind the event as executive director of the nonprofit Boston Athletic Association.
But the promotion of health and fitness and wellness has always been the core mission of the BAA. If one looks to the strategic implementation of that, it really takes three parts. One, the most well-known, is the production of race events, most notably the Boston Marathon. The second part is community service. And the third element is a rededication to the development of high-performance American athletes, going back to the very roots of the BAA, back at the time of the revival of the Olympic Games.
Competition, community, and tradition, these core components have sustained this marathon for over a century. Millions of runners, spectators, and volunteers have shared inspiring moments on the course that runs through 8 towns and cities on its way to a downtown finish on Boston's Boylston Street. But balancing consistency with growth can be a challenge. Race director Dave McGilvery has experienced it firsthand.
We have no more real estate to produce this event today than they had 100 years ago. So somehow, some way, we have to creatively and magically fit that many more people on this course with the same amount of real estate. That's not an easy job to do.
Working with lead corporate partner John Hancock and with the help of thousands of race day volunteers, the BAA manages to do magic each year. And with a budget of about $10 million, the marathon brings many times that sum back into the local economy. But what keeps the marathon thriving? An ability to adapt and change that's been a hallmark for decades. In the 1960s, women joined the competitive field. Qualifying times became a condition of entry in 1970. 1975 saw the first officially recognized wheelchair competitor complete the race. And to accommodate the number of runners, the race now starts in multiple waves.
You are the trustee of an event that's a 100-year-old event plus. There's always the trade-off with innovation versus tradition. How do you deal with that dynamic?
Well, for us, innovation is at the core, even though this is a very, very old event. If you go back to its roots, it was itself an innovation. It was the Boston Athletic Association that sent the majority of the U.S. Olympic team to Athens in 1896 when the Olympic Games were revived. They brought home the majority of gold medals, and they brought home the idea of putting on a marathon. We want to make sure that the marathon is as up-to-date as it can be.
What's the next big innovation?
It will be whatever it needs to be. We work collaboratively with the 5 other marathons that are part of the Abbott World Marathon Majors. And a good part of what we do in that collaboration is look to combine our efforts and our innovative thoughts to make sure that we're delivering the very best services we can to runners. And it is from that innovation continues to spring.
Since the World Marathon Major Series began in 2006, Boston has been one of 6 races that gives runners points toward an annual championship, with men's and women's winners splitting $1 million first prize. It's added value for Boston's elite competitors, and it's helped participating marathons raise their game.
For years, this industry has been fairly fragmented. You know, we all kind of do our own thing. With the advent of the World Marathon Majors, it isn't just about the prize money to the elite athletes and them going competitively for that. It's also about working together as a race community and trying to elevate the stature of the industry itself. And I think we've made quantum leaps in doing that.
But in 2013, tragedy interrupted this trajectory of progress. The bombings at the marathon that cost 4 lives. A year later, with this memory fresh, the race once again took place in the spirit of competition, community, and tradition. But most importantly, it was a celebration of resiliency.
If there is one thing that I think resides at the essence of what we came to call Boston Strong, is that people here will do what they choose, no matter what anybody does, to try to stop them.
Last year's race was epic, and I never saw what I witnessed this past year out on that course. One word to describe it was respect. And what I also witnessed that I had never seen before is the amount of signs that people held. Boston Strong and we will not be denied, and people needed to get a message out there to the world that we want to take back our race. We will take back Boylston Street, we will take back our race, we will take back that finish line, and indeed we did.
And for the first time in 30 years, an American runner won the men's open division of the race. 39-year-old Mev Kevleski didn't just finish strong, he finished Boston strong.
It was fun to have an American win, just because it's always fun to have the home team win a game. But Meb in particular, with the wave of emotion that was so prevalent last year, made it even more thrilling. And Meb ran away with it. And in much the same way that Joan Benoit, now Joan Benoit Samuelson, ran away with the first women's Olympic marathon back in LA in 1984, showed gut, showed grit, took off and said to everybody else, I'm going after this race. If you want to win, come with me. No one could do it. For Meb, it was particularly emotional. He had the names of the 4 people who died the year before, written on the corners of his race number.
Perhaps the greatest indicator of what makes the Boston Marathon unique, that after 118 years, it still brings a spirit that's completely authentic, a spirit that engages the world.
What we saw here in Boston in April of 2014, a year after the horrors of April 2013, what we saw was a collective expression from everybody who was in the race, around the race, watching the race around the world, of a determination that it would be successful. It was a collective expression of will that everything was going to be good, and it was.
The 2014 Boston Marathon certainly ranks as one of the most emotional events in recent sports memory. And for perspective, we're honored to have our special guest co-host, one of the greatest distance runners in history, 2-time Olympic medalist in the marathon, Frank Shorter. Frank, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Now, you do the race for Universal. What's your favorite moment from last year's race?
When I saw Meb Keflezighi make that last left-hand turn onto Boylston Street with a lead, didn't matter how much of a lead, with that slight downhill, I knew that's where you want to be. You get the reinforcement saying to yourself, even if I die a little, I can keep my momentum going. I knew mentally that's where he was trying to get.
So you saw him for the first time on that hill. How long was it from there to the finish line?
You know, I'm not sure exactly, but I think it's probably about a minute and a half. And what's interesting about that, you say, oh, God, it's such a long time. But when you're focused like that, it doesn't seem to take very long.
Doesn't take very long for the runner, but it might take very long for all the spectators.
Mentally, the time becomes condensed as a runner because you're so focused on what you're doing.
Well, it meant a lot to America and everywhere else. Let's talk about the course itself. It's not a place where you can get a record because of the way the course is configured, but it is a great place for runners to race. Why is this such a magnet for the world's runners?
It always pays to be first, whether it's in the race or as a marathon. Boston is the first. And with that history has come over time a prestige, unlike any other marathon, perhaps except the Olympic Games. And so you have to be on that day. There are no excuses. You're not saving it for another race. And the prestige within the running community itself is much higher than any other race in the world, again, other than maybe the Olympic Games.
Prestige is always hard to capture and sustain, and you've seen this race grow and evolve over years. How do you think the BAA has done in maintaining that balance between tradition and innovation?
Well, they were very lucky that John Hancock came along at a precise moment where they had to make that decision about whether or not they were truly going to jump into the future. It had to do with prize money, and they did. They made that decision. Even though they were steeped in more history than anyone else in any marathon, they realized that the time had come to change.
Frank Shorter will stay with us. We have a lot more ground to cover when it comes to the business of the Boston Marathon. Coming up, we'll discuss how John Hancock has put its signature on the race over the last 3 decades with a sponsorship that truly goes the extra mile.
Over the 30 years, we've given out over $17 million in prize money and bonuses.
And later on, I'll sit down with Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, who's convinced that his hometown is ready to host the world at the 2024 Summer Olympics.
This Olympic here in Boston will be the most walkable in the history of the Olympic Games. So it's a different model that we're looking at, and a different model that's being used here.
Stay with us. Beyond the Medals, coming right back. Welcome back to Beyond the Medals. 30 years ago, the Boston Marathon was struggling. Sure, it had plenty of prestige, but it offered no prize money, which hurt its appeal with the world's best professional runners. In 1986, John Hancock Financial Services signed on as the marathon's primary sponsor, and in the eyes of many, saved the race. John Hancock executive Rob Friedman recalls the beginning of what has become a legendary 30-year partnership.
Well, one of the first things we did was introduce prize money to the race, and equal prize money for both men and women, as well as extending prize money to the pushroom wheelchair athletes. And that had a positive, immediate impact on the marathon. And over the 30 years, we've given out over $17 million in prize money and bonuses. The prize purse this year, $806,000, with the opportunity for $220,000 of prize bonus money. In addition to the prize money, we were able to introduce a program that provided guaranteed entries to people that didn't otherwise qualify. I mean, Boston is, and even today, predominantly qualifiers, but there's a small slice, roughly about 20% of the field, that runs on behalf of charity and raises quite a bit of money for some very fine nonprofits.
You recruit and host some of the more elite athletes in the world for the race itself. Explain that program.
Yeah, John Hancock is very unique in the running world. Over the last 30 years, we've recruited 750 athletes from 45 different countries into the John Hancock Elite Athlete Program. We host these athletes at what would be considered an Olympic-like village, and we meet them when they land at Logan Airport, and we take care of every need of theirs leading up to the race and afterwards, and we take them back to the airport to send them home, and it really is a first-class red carpet ride that we give these athletes.
The athletes themselves, therefore, and your program, they really don't function as brand ambassadors in the formal sense, but effectively they are, aren't they?
They are, and in fact, one of the new programs that we're very excited about is called our Marathon on the Road program. So not only do these athletes come to Boston to run for the John Hancock Elite Athlete Program, but we also take them on the road to do various events for us during the year.
How do you specifically tailor the brand recognition aspect of this for the elite runners at the same time trying to appeal to the mass of runners who participate as well?
Well, one thing is that Boston is unique in many different respects, and the sanctity of the race and the tradition of the race, there haven't been a lot of commercial aspects to it, and we respect that. It's not a sponsorship. It is truly a partnership. John Hancock was never interested in putting our name on the event. In many respects, it's sort of the Augusta of road running.
Right. Traditional textbook analysis of corporate involvement includes the word activation. Yours is so much more because you're a partner, but describe some of the race day activation that you also do.
Well, I think one of the highlights of our program is our VIP program. So we have our employees and special guests that get special amenities on race day. And there's a tent that they meet at in the morning. They go out to the start line. They have a nice inside waiting area. And when they come to the finish line, we greet them there in a special VIP tent. So that's a privilege of coming in through the John Hancock program.
Traditional ROI is obviously an important issue to everybody, but are there ways that you can quantify your successes on an annual basis? How do you measure success?
Yeah, I think one of the important measures, and because we're such a community-focused organization, the amount of money that we've been able to raise through our charity program far exceeds the investment in this partnership. We have been able to raise more than $220 million for charity. It goes beyond that. It goes, the fact is that our business is very much a relationship business, and we're able to measure the importance of the relationship that we have with the men and women who sell our products, the men and women who work for our company, and again, from the community standpoint.
We're back with the great marathoner Frank Shorter, Olympic medalist in 72 and 76. So in the mid-'80s, there was some turbulence and trouble with the race. Is it true that John Hancock really saved the race?
Well, from the elite racer's perspective, he certainly did. I called the 85 race when Jeff Smith, the winner, stopped twice, once to tie his shoe and once to stretch, won by a substantial margin, and yet ran very slowly. And all of us who were there knew they were in big trouble if they didn't do something to get a better elite field. So John Hancock did step in. They really did.
Well, and many marathons have title sponsors, but none other has a 30-year partner that deals with all kinds of logistics and recruiting and every element that you need to succeed. How unique is that John Hancock sponsorship?
Oh, it's very special. More events like this and more relationships should be based primarily on loyalty. And that's why it's lasted so long. And these events, the Boston Marathon in particular, the community takes on a proprietary interest, and many people involved become caretakers. And I view John Hancock as more of a caretaker, really, than a title sponsor, and they've always been able to maintain that balance.
And you can tell that they're a little less worried about traditional ROI than they're worried about community goals. And community
Absolutely. They know they're in this with everybody else, and they're part of the community. And no public relations plan can come up with that. That just has to evolve. They can involve that first year, make sure the elite athletes came back, and then over time, every year, they and the BAA do something to just tweak it, make it a little better. Again, it's a proprietary interest based on really caring.
And let's talk about sponsorship of the individual runners, individual athletes, because today it's hard to be elite without that. But talk about the balance between sponsorships that'll provide training and development money maybe, but also could be a distraction. How do you deal with that?
Well, there's enough money in most major races that it does trickle down so that those athletes coming up, I have no problem with the athletes on top perhaps doing a little better. Meb Keflezighi's situation is very good because his brother Howie really takes care of a lot of it. He's a lawyer, he's a very good businessman, and he provides a perspective for his brother that allows him to filter things out. In the way I put it is, Howie probably make sure that Meb doesn't start believing everything that's written about him, that he maintains a certain attitude towards what he's doing. And that's why I think Meb, you talk about John Hancock, 30 years, Meb Keflezighi's going to be 40, and he's still in there.
Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? In just a few minutes, we'll have the interview with the reigning Boston champion, Meb Keflezighi, who came out of nowhere with the marathon win in 2014. Since then, he's become the face of the sport in the United States.
It's been an amazing business, changed life for me.
And up next, we'll look at a foundation of financial growth for the U.S. Olympic Committee, a new fundraising program that's bringing major donors on board with Team USA.
This is a much cheaper way to own a team than going out and buying a football team or a basketball team.
And here's a test of your Olympic knowledge beyond the medals. What company's been the longest continuing sponsor of the Olympic movement? Here's a hint. It's been involved with the Games for over 80 years. We'll give you the answer a little later. Unlike many Olympic programs around the world, the U.S. Olympic Committee receives no financial support from the government. The bulk of funding for teams and athletes comes from corporate sponsorship and private donations. In 2013, the USOC established a fundraising organization, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Foundation, and hired John Denny as Chief Development Officer. Team USA's philanthropic leader has been hard at work pursuing ambitious goals.
We've been in the process of clarifying our gift objectives, building a board for the foundation, and really establishing all the infrastructure and the business processes and so forth to take us to a much higher level in the future.
Do you have a specific dollar goal figure in mind, or is it just general pressure to raise as much money as you can?
So there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, so we're on a very steep trajectory in terms of the level of philanthropic support that we're hoping to raise in the coming years. We're starting at a baseline of about $20 million a year.
From direct support to teams and athletes to upgrades in training and facilities, every dollar that comes in can make a difference. CEO Scott Blackman is counting on the new foundation to strengthen Team USA's pitch for contributions.
Fundraising is, I would say, one of our top 2 or 3 priorities and has been for the last few years. We are trying to find ways to engage our volunteers, to engage the people who are fortunate enough to have the ability to make a sizable gift, to feel like they own part of Team USA. Some of our biggest donors are owners of teams in the various professional leagues, and this is a much cheaper way to own a team than going out and buying a football team or a basketball team.
And it's not just major donors who can make a major impact. In 2015, the foundation will introduce an annual fund to bring more supporters into the philanthropic fold.
Where we're really trying to connect with Americans who might make a $10 or a $20 or a $100 gift. And one of the most interesting stories is that we have the president of our foundation, it's actually the chairman of the board of our foundation, a guy named Gordy Crawford, who came to us because he was part of one of those programs 15 years ago. He sent in a $10 check, and that grew to a $100 check, and then a $1,000 check, and then a $5,000 check. Then finally we reached out to Gordy and said, hey, maybe we should spend more time together. And Gordy's one of our most generous givers and really helped us create the model for this new foundation.
We have fantastic leadership on board, with Gordy leading the board effort as our chair. We've enlisted a very high-powered and fantastic board of 60 members. I'm also enlisting a group of trustees who are helping us as well.
You've got experience from your fundraising at the renowned Stanford University, and very clearly, at least you know who the donors are at the certain level. USOC may be a little different, I guess, because the donors are not as easy to identify, possibly. The athletes who have succeeded aren't necessarily always the business titans who will automatically give. Compare and contrast.
So there's a lot of similarities between raising money in higher education and in this role with the USOC. I would say 80, 90% of it translates directly into kind of this role. I think what's different, and it's both an opportunity and a challenge, is that in a university setting, your primary source of prospects or your prospect pool is primarily alumni, where in supporting Team USA, anyone can be excited about our Olympic and Paralympic athletes and be a prospect to support that effort. The challenge is just focusing on the right prospects at the right time and making sure that we're focused in our efforts.
Generally, when you're out on the stump giving the sales pitch, is it ROI related? Is it patriotism related? Is it satisfaction of seeing athletes improve related? Is it all of that?
So, in general, that message is tailored to whoever we're talking to as a prospect because, again, I think people's motivations differ, so we want to make sure that we're connecting our donors and prospects to things that they're going to care about and the impact that they're going to make. Ultimately, it comes down to how we can demonstrate the impact of those gifts on what they care about. We have a tremendous opportunity with our donors to connect them directly with the product that they're supporting, and that's our athletes. And we have that opportunity every 2 years at the Games. And so we have a program where our donors participate in our Olympic hospitality program. They spend 6 or 7 days with us at the Games, interact with some of the athletes, go to events, have a fantastic experience. And to me, having gone through this for the first time in Sochi in February, it's just a fantastic way of, again, connecting donors to the beneficiaries in a very tangible way where those donors can understand and visually feel the impact of their gifts.
When we come back on Beyond the Medals, more on the business of the marathon. Nobody could catch Meb Keflezighi in Boston last April, but we'll catch up to the champion in just a few moments. What's the victory meant to his career on and off the course? Find out straight ahead as Beyond the Medals continues. Meb Keflezighi's victory in the 2014 marathon made him a household name in the sport of distance running. And his social media footprint now compares with a number of very well-known stars in very high-profile sports. Meb has a larger social media audience than NFL Pro Bowl linebacker Von Miller, top-ranked NASCAR driver Joey Logano, and veteran South African golfer Ernie Els, winner of 4 majors on the PGA Tour. Welcome back to Beyond the Medals. I'm Rick Horrow with special guest co-host and Olympic legend Frank Shorter. What we've got now is truly a gathering of champions as we welcome defending Boston Marathon champion Meb Keflezighi, taking time out from training to join us from Southern California. Meb, it's absolutely an honor to have you on the show, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be with you guys.
Absolutely. And you've called Boston the biggest win of your career. What's your favorite memory from the day of the race?
I mean, Boston 2014 was special for me, for the United States, for Boston especially, because we changed what was a catastrophic moment at the Boston Street in 2013, and to chant USA, USA coming on Boston Street is just, you can only imagine and dream about it, but to actually do it on April 21st last year, it was a memorable time for me and for everybody that was there, be able to be there on the feet and be able to just say, you know what, we did it, we came back. 36,000 people were trying to own the Boston Street, and to be able to lead them to that chant USA, USA was just a wonderful day.
It was an incredible tribute for you to put the names of the 2013 victims on your race bib, and you recall what happened last year. The memory has to still be emotional for you as you head into this year's race, right?
Most definitely. I put the name of the victims on my bib the night before the race, and then I just knew it was going to be Boston Strong philosophy or metaphor that we were going to use. And with the Boston Strong, I tried to give a Meb Strong, no matter what the outcome was going to be, but it was just a special moment for me to carry the 4 victims' name on my bib to get inspiration, draw inspiration. And when it was tough, I was hurting pretty bad, but you know what, you think about them, you think about the crowd, you think about the signs that they had on the street, Boston Strong, and I just gave it all I had. I was ready to live with the consequences of what's going to happen. So to have the victim's name on my bib, it was a special moment for me, and I hope I treated them very well.
Meb, I've always held out that you're one of those rare athletes who can truly peak when it really matters. I mean, 2004 in the Olympic race, you get a silver medal. 9 years later, you come back in Boston. I mean, what was going through your mind truly as you were coming in? People always ask that, but I really want to know, from Coolidge Corner in, at what point did you really think, boy, if I don't die, I got a shot?
Yeah. I mean, the guy was right on my tail with a mile to go, but coming to Com Avenue and make a right on Hereford, I thought I had it, but I know I have to sprint hard. But then for sure, when I made that left turn on Boylston, I just said, as long as I don't cramp up or get hamstring tightened up, I think I got it. But, I'd cross myself and just say, you know what? I am so happy, honored to be able to be leading. Just keep focusing. I wanted to do something where the bombing happened, but I just said, this is too big of a race. Just keep driving, and I felt blessed to have that opportunity to become the first American in 31 years to pull the victory.
Well, you know, Shorter cares very much about what you did on Boylston Street and on Hartford. I care also about what you do in the boardrooms of America. What kind of business opportunities have crossed your path since you won last year?
You know, I've been asked to give motivational speaking, and I've been asked to do commencement speeches that I have lined up, and the sponsors we're going to announce a couple of new ones and a couple that have been renewed. It's been an amazing business, changed life for me.
Now the issue is training and balancing your media obligations, your sponsor obligations. How do you keep those in balance going forward?
Well, my name is Meb. I maintain an excellent balance, and I try to be the best that I can as a family man, as a husband and a father, and also as an ambassador for my sponsorship. All my sponsors now, what they look for is my association. I hope to be a good role model and representative to them as an ambassador. But, you know, training still takes a priority as much as I can in terms of until 2016. But you know, I try to live by my name. You know, you can't sleep 24 hours, you can't train 24 hours, but you got to have a balance, and I try to balance it out as much as I can. But I also have Team Meb is very strong. You know, they're from pacing, from my wife, from my brother Howie Agent, and Coach Bob Larson as a mentor. I have pacemakers like Rich Levy and Sarah Chavez from Mammoth. So there's so many people behind the scene that help me be the best that I can, and I could just delegate on what I need and try to do a good show and give them my best so I can excel, and also my sponsors can be very happy.
Are you gonna train for next year? Are you gonna give it one more go?
Frank, you know how it is to be able to be an elite athlete with less than a year to go now. I feel 26 is my goal to be able to represent the United States. Hopefully, you know, it is always an honor to represent the United States, and 2016 is around the corner. February is the trials, and I hope I can punch my tickets top 3 to go to Rio. And then also my daughter is, she was 2.5 years old in London. She does not remember, the youngest one doesn't remember what happened in London, so I have another motivation to get ready for Rio.
Orthopedically, you really feeling sound? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, how have you altered your training now in terms of recovery? Because you have to take a little more time. You know, how have you adjusted? Maybe that's your talent, really, is your ability to adjust as you're aging.
Yeah, I mean, I am healthy right now. I self-direct myself on what my training is going to be. I use Coach Bob Larson as a mentor, but I just listen day to day and week to week how my body is feeling. I'm healthy right now. Yeah, I have to spread my training to 9-day cycle. Nothing is in a week is repetitive. I change it to see what my body needs, whether it means more stamina or means more speed. But in between, I take more recovery time, and obviously all this is going to be available. Met for Mortals, the book that is coming out also. So, you know, it's been a blessing since winning the Boston Marathon, and I just feel one more year to try to give it a shot, one more to represent the United States on my 4th Olympic team.
Mev Koleski, thank you very much. Listen, get out of the studio, go train. Good luck in Boston. Good luck in Rio. For both of us, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much. I got to earn a top 3, though. You know, nothing is punching the mark, but I hope to be top 3 at the trials in LA.
We know. Get out there and train. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. As Boston prepares to host its 119th marathon, the city's also bidding to host the 2024 Summer Olympics. Coming up next on Beyond the Medals, we'll talk to Mayor Marty Walsh about the nuts and bolts of bringing the games to town and the value of being in the conversation.
Boston's a little different, kind of not the typical place where you might want to go, and I think we're gonna have a lot of attention looked at us because of that.
April is a marathonathon on Universal Sports Network with live coverage of 3 huge events: the Paris Marathon, the Boston Marathon, and the London Marathon. The races in Boston and London count toward the Abbott World Marathon Majors Championship. For a complete schedule and broadcast information, visit universalsports.com. When Boston was chosen as the U.S. candidate to bid for the 2024 Summer Olympics, it was another big sports win for the city. In the last 13 years, Boston's major professional teams have brought home 8 championships. Nobody's enjoying the success more than Mayor Marty Walsh. The Dorchester native is a lifelong sports fan and a longtime Patriots season ticket holder. He's proud of Boston's sports heritage, even though in his political role, he's cautious about spending on sports.
We haven't done that here in Boston, and I historically voted against that. I think there's an opportunity for us to do other things to make the investment work. I think it's very difficult to take taxpayers' dollars and use it into building venues. It's very hard to explain to the public. And in Boston, I mean, other places they do it as an economic engine to kind of jumpstart the economy. We don't have to do that here, but I certainly believe that we have to be helpful because these sports teams bring in an awful lot to the economy. They have a long-lasting effect on our cities and towns, and I think it's important to have that relationship.
Mayor Walsh is clearly excited about the Olympic possibility, but he's also got to make sure the Olympic plan works for the city, both in 2024 and for the long term. I sat down with him at City Hall to find out why the Olympic bid has his support.
I support it for a lot of reasons. I support it, first and foremost, really, it's a real opportunity to promote the city of Boston on a world stage like we've never been promoted before. And I think that's one of the things I think is important. I think it's a good economic benefit to the city as well. I think not just the tourism of the Olympics, but leading up to the Olympics, the tourism, and then after the Olympics, people coming and seeing where the venues happen. Let's assume we get chosen for the Olympics in 2017. For the next 7 years, families are going to make their vacationing in Boston because they intend on coming back for the Olympics. So our tourism is going to go up. People are going to be coming to the city to see where Olympic Village is going to be, to see where the volleyball is going to be, to see where the stadium is going to be. That's going to be part of a tourist attraction, even if it's not built yet. It happened in Chicago where their convention center business went up. It just by being in the conversation for the Olympic conversation, it changed the dynamics of the economy in Chicago to some degree.
There are also minimum International Olympic Committee requirements as far as infrastructure and as far as facilities. How do you guard against overbuilding and mandate responsible development?
What's the plan that's been put together? The plan really talks about a walkable Olympics. This Olympic here in Boston will be the most walkable in the history of the Olympic Games. So it's a different model that we're looking at and a different model that's being used here. And I think that that's going to make a big difference when we go on the world stage. Also, the transportation infrastructure in Boston, because we're a city of 47 square miles, there's an opportunity for us to, as we upgrade the transportation system in Boston, it's going to be used before and after the Olympics. So it's something that has to happen anyway. So I'm using the Olympics as a catalyst to jumpstart a lot of these different infrastructure programs.
Are you prepared to go down to Rio and explain to the people here how your planning process might be different than some of the things that are happening down there?
Well, yeah, I'm going to go around to some of the spots. I mean, I'm certainly going to go to London that had Olympics the last time and talk to them a little bit about what they learned, the mistakes they made, and certainly we'll go around the world as best we can to talk about it. I mean, certainly some of the locations I do want to go to.
Scott Blackman and others are pretty confident that the revenue sharing deal that the USOC cut with the IOC going forward puts you and Boston in a better position than Chicago and New York for getting 2024, but you also have to convince the people of your community that this is real. How do you do that?
Well, I think the USOC and the IOC learned a lot over those two experiences, and the USOC not going for a bid in 2020 kind of put a little fear, maybe not fear, but concern in the IOC, saying that America has to be in this. I think it's like 65% of the revenue generated from the Olympics happens in the United States of America. So you need to have the United States in the conversation about hosting the Olympics. And I think that, this could be a time where people say it's time to bring the games back to the United States of America. Boston, East Coast city, a little different than any other city that's been chosen before. We had Atlanta, we had Utah, we had LA and Lake Placid, but Boston's a little different. Kind of not the typical place where you might want to go. And I think we're gonna have a lot of attention looked at us because of that.
Internally, you've scheduled 9 public hearings.
Yep.
You attended one of them in February. What happened?
We learned a lot. But what happens in them, people come in with a lot of questions. And they get answered the best they can at that particular moment. But it's an opportunity for us all, whether it's the USOC 2024 or the City of Boston, to understand the concerns of people so we can address them at the next meeting and get all the information the public's looking for out there.
2 years from now, you're in an elevator in Lausanne and you're going up to make the presentation, and you're stuck for about 30 seconds, and Thomas Bach, the head of the IOC, is the only guy in the elevator with you. How do you use that 30 seconds?
I was told we can't lobby them.
You're not allowed, it's just factual presentation.
So I'm probably going to say to him, he has a great suit on, looks great. I think Thomas Bach already kind of, he didn't pick Boston, but during the Super Bowl, he was interviewed, and he talked about all the strong qualities of Boston. So I don't think we have to necessarily sell the IOC on why Boston is the right choice. I think we have to convince them why it's important to bring the Olympic Games back to the United States of America, what we can do, and how this Olympics that we're going to host here in Boston changes forever the way the Olympics are delivered around the world. More economical, potentially walkable ways of doing it, so they can get more involvement and more competition in that field.
Middle of 2017, are you circling that date? Are you excited?
Yeah, it's the time that we get chosen or not get chosen. It's also I run for re-election right after that. Same
Well,
year. So,
2-0.
I'm not going to live or die by the Olympics, but I certainly know that, the fact that every now and then I'll be driving in the car thinking about the fact that we are on our way to becoming an Olympic city, how exciting it is for Boston, how exciting it is for the United States of America. Understanding that the way that we do the Olympics in America are very different than the way some countries do it around the world, and seeing that the model that we're using is a model that will be able to be taken as a prototype for the Olympics for future generations. I think that's an important piece here.
If the games do come to Boston in 2024, where would they hold the marathon? That question is still under discussion. Tom Grilk of the BAA gave us some insight into the options.
The Boston Marathon course could be used. There's nothing in the Olympic rules that would prevent it. The issue is that the configuration of the Boston Marathon course right now is such that it is not eligible for world record recognition because of a net loss in elevation. When we conducted the U.S. Olympic marathon trials for women in 2008 here in Boston, we did it on a different course that started and finished where the Boston Marathon finish line is, but it was a kind of a criterium course that went around the Back Bay once and then did several loops out around the Charles River. One could also imagine an Olympic course that is completely unto itself, that goes by some of the most historic areas in Boston, rather like what was done in London. And we are quite prepared and happy to assist in any way with any element of that.
Still plenty left on Beyond the Medals. Alongside those who run for glory in Boston are those who run for charity, including some of the area's sports heavyweights. What brings the Patriots out in force on Patriots Day? Find out when we return. Here's the answer to our Beyond the Medals knowledge check. The longest continuous sponsor of the Olympic movement is the Coca-Cola Company, which began its association with the Games in 1928. If you're not an elite competitor recruited by John Hancock, there are two ways to get into the Boston Marathon starting field. You can post a qualifying time, or you can run for charity. More than 2,500 slots are set aside for charity entrants who run to raise funds for the marathon's many official charitable partners. One of those partners happens to be the charitable foundation of the best football team in the world.
As a lifelong Bostonian and really just a lifelong sports fan, I can confidently say that there's no greater community building event than the Boston Marathon. And it's an honor for the Patriots Foundation to be a part of that. We have 30 numbers for this year's marathon, and through our partnership with them that started in '09, we've been able to raise over $1.25 million to our charitable endeavors.
When you see former Patriots players running in the marathon, not because they have to, but because they want to, how does it make you feel?
It's great. You know, it shows that they've become a part of this community. It really speaks to the power of the marathon and how it creates that sense of community, and everybody wants to be a part of it, either running, watching, or even volunteering.
Back once again with Frank Shorter. Frank, you watch guys like Josh Kraft be involved, the Kraft family involved in charities as well. Charities really good for the sport?
Absolutely. I mean, a ton of money is raised. Many, many charities raise most of their funds through road racing. But the other thing that's more subtle that I like is it makes Boston in particular more inclusive, because the field is really limited by the width of the roadway in Hopkinton. This allows for this inclusion. It allows people who are very passionate about a certain charity to choose their charity. And I don't think most people understand how much incredible medical breakthrough research has been funded by these people who choose to run for other people and other reasons who otherwise wouldn't consider entering a race. And so in a way, it's broadened the demographic. And guess what? Some of them find they actually like to run.
Frank Shorter, you're an incredible ambassador for the sport, and thank you for helping me host this show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That'll do it for this edition of Beyond the Medals. Be sure to tune in to Universal Sports Network in April for exclusive live coverage of the Paris Marathon, the Boston Marathon, and the London Marathon, 3 of the world's most exciting distance running events. We'll see you then. I'm Rick Horrow. Thanks for watching Beyond the Medals.